people are pretty sure when you come to a psychiatrist and show up in this conventional mental health world that there is something wrong with them or they wouldn't come. And so this is actually the only field, the only subspecialty in all of medicine and all of doctorhood where a client becomes upset with the doctor when the doctor says that they're okay. I really want to tell people that they are okay. That's really what I want. That's what I'm really about. There might be nothing wrong with you in the same way that there's nothing wrong with a log burning in a fire. The idea is there's a fire out here. And if you're having a hard time staying focused, if you're having a hard time getting stuff done or staying happy or avoiding fear or avoiding anxiety or depression or, having difficulty with people in the world or with completing projects or any of that. Seriously, welcome to humanity. In America, what we're looking at is that the mental health system is actually built to perpetuate the condition it's marketed to treat. You come into the mental health system, you get your diagnosis, and it is the job of the mental health worker to actually sustain that diagnosis. People are not interested in leaving their diagnosis. There's something about saving our ego by being able to say, that wasn't me, that was my ADHD. That wasn't me, that was my bipolar disorder. Why did I yell at my wife? Because I got impulse control disorder. Why did I not shower? Because I must be depressed. When I connect with someone, boom, man, it's just beautiful. And that doesn't matter whatever level of care or whatever diagnosis they think they're sporting. You can get toxic right through your eyes, right through your ears. There's plenty of stuff on the internet. If you watch it for a while, you will be toxic. Guaranteed. It's always been the most miserable that it's ever been. It's just gotten a little more miserable. It's always been, minute by minute, the most miserable it's ever been. These are the best of times and worst of times. Men and women are different. I don't think there's any question about that. I like to protect my women. I like to keep my women secure. And when that happens, we have a much happier life. I'm not built to use the word they when talking about one other person. I don't know how to do that. Over time, we have all learned how to pretend to be people that we're not in order to protect the people that we are. What the hell is up with Spotify?
The following podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice or opinion. The thoughts of the host do not reflect upon the thoughts of the guest, nor vice versa. Audience discretion is advised. Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Health King's Court, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Health. Today, I have a very interesting guest with us. He's been in the field of mental health for almost 4 decades. He's a non-diagnosing psychiatrist and the founder of Welcome to Humanity. He's an author and a podcaster himself. He believes that healing comes from the harmonic resonance of a human connection, and he entered the field of psychiatry to be that healing and connecting person. Having seen over 30,000 patients, he's known as the Un-doctor for how he un-medicates and undoctrinates his patients. That is Dr. Fred Moss. Dr. Fred, thank you very much for coming on the show. Welcome.
Zach, thanks for having me. It's really, really looking forward to today.
Yeah, me too. So let's start with who you are and that phrase that I put right in the intro there, the Un-doctor. Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting phrase because the term or label doctor is one that most wear very proudly. But here you are contradicting it in how you like to describe yourself, saying you're the Un-doctor. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so it's a moniker that a friend of mine gave me just a few years ago. And it's an affectionate moniker, more or less, made on the idea that not simply unmedicating and then undoctrinating people, but the key feature actually is the undiagnosing part. So the idea of being a doctor or a psychiatrist is that people come to us in order to get confirmation that there's something wrong with them. And, people are pretty sure when you come to a psychiatrist and show up in this conventional mental health world that there is something wrong with them or they wouldn't come. And so this is actually the only field, the only subspecialty in all of medicine and all of doctorhood where a client becomes upset with the doctor when the doctor says that they're okay. So when you start looking at that, I really want to tell people that they are okay. That's really what I want. That's what I'm really about. The idea is that, this is a challenging, hurdle-driven, obstacle-ridden world that we're in. And if you're having trouble actually negotiating and navigating your way through life, welcome to humanity is what I have to say. Now, there might be nothing wrong with you in the same way that there's nothing wrong with a log burning in a fire. The idea is there's a fire out here. And if you're having a hard time staying focused, if you're having a hard time getting stuff done or staying happy or avoiding fear or avoiding anxiety or depression or, having difficulty with people in the world or with completing projects or any of that, seriously, welcome to humanity. And so in order to get through life, what I'm trying to do is let people know that there might be nothing wrong with them. And if there's nothing wrong with them, then there's nothing that fits my name better than calling me the Un-doctor, because in fact, I'm undiagnosing, unmedicating, and then undoctrinating people. And that's just a term that really means moving them out of the conventional mental health system if I can. Because why would I do that? The reason I would do that is the mental health system, and this comes as no surprise, is totally broken. And the mental health system, just like much of medicine, has its flaws that are inherent in it. Meaning, you come into the mental health system, you get your diagnosis, and it is the job of the mental health worker to actually sustain that diagnosis. If you actually lose your diagnosis, the mental health worker can't even see you anymore. They need to have you keep your diagnosis. And in most cases, the client or the customer or the patient or whatever you want to call it is eager also to keep that diagnosis for lots of reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into in this conversation.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said there. And I very much agree with a lot of the themes behind what you're saying, because life is hard. You said, welcome to humanity. It's welcome to reality. Who said life is supposed to be easy? People have this notion that everything's supposed to be la-di-da, I'm an adult, everything's happy, honky-dory. But that's just not reality. And chasing that concept of eternal happiness and perpetual happiness and satisfaction, even with life or the state of life, is only setting people up for failure. And the easier route, rather than understanding, hey, yes, life is hard, it's supposed to be hard, what can I do about it? The easier thing to do is just say, there is something wrong with me because I'm not happy, because I'm not satisfied, rather than trying to make changes to get more satisfied and then inherently get more fulfilled. And then happiness comes more often because of that. Obviously, the mental health system, just like most systems of this world, are not in our favor, are not in favor of their customers, because they are customers. And unfortunately, a patient cured is a patient lost. So though there are many wonderful, holistic, and good-natured and good-intentioned practitioners out there in all sorts of fields, psychiatry or otherwise, unfortunately, there are many that you're their paycheck as a patient. And you can't just go to any particular mental health professional and assume that they're going to be in your favor or trying to actually fix you or even know how to fix you. And it's a sad state of society and mental health overall that we've gotten to these days. Mm-hmm. And so how would you describe the average state of mental health these days? Where are people at? And I know you've traveled, so let's pose it as an interesting two-part question. You're located in America currently, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But you've also traveled and worked potentially with patients from elsewhere as well. How would you describe the average state of mental health in America and perhaps in other locations, if you have a thought on that?
Well, thank you for the really, really broad and important question. So, in America, what we're looking at is that the mental health system is actually built to perpetuate the condition it's marketed to treat. Like you said, that's a capitalistic phenomenon. Of course it is. A patient cured is a patient lost, as you said. And there's an opportunity inside the mental health system. Like no one actually gets into, not even the customers, not even the patients come into the field thinking that they're going to be cured. What they're hoping for is that it doesn't get worse, that it gets sustained, that we're able to prevent it from deteriorating too quickly. But when you get a mental health condition, there is nobody who thinks I'm going to get on the other side of the mental health condition. They think you now have this and you have it eternally. And that's true with nearly every condition, either eternally or that you're going to have relapses, that once you have it, you have it. You have a backdrop of getting it over and over again. The system in America is built to perpetuate the symptoms it's marketed to treat. And again, that's not even a claw. That's not even a slug at the system. That's just data. It's simply true.
Yeah.
Like, look, if I write inside of your chart, no diagnosis, then I don't get paid for that event by any third party at all. I need to write a diagnosis. I actually do. And it's not like I'm a bad person. I need to get paid. So if I'm going to get paid, the least I'm going to do, what most clinicians do, is they choose what they call a benign diagnosis, like the least damaging diagnosis. Usually that runs into something called adjustment disorder. And there's no clinician out there who doesn't know about 309.28, because 309.28 is the adjustment disorder ICD-9 code. So look, that's the point. That's the whole reason that the mental health system runs in the United States. And people want their diagnosis. That's the other thing. People are not interested in leaving their diagnosis because there's a lot of reasons for this. And let me leave the disclaimer that I think I have about this. If anyone's listening who is really happy with their diagnosis and also really happy with the treatment that they're getting and really happy with the mental health system, and they have found something that actually works inside of who they are as a client or a patient of the mental health system, please keep doing what you're doing. Whatever it is that you found that is working, I'm not asking you to stop that ever, anywhere in life. If you have found something that's truly working, the best that you can imagine, please keep doing it. I'm not talking to that group. Zach, the people I'm talking to are the hundreds of millions of people who don't fall into that criteria, who are out there knowing that they've been misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, overdiagnosed, mistreated, undertreated, overtreated, who are not getting an optimized life out of taking on the diagnosis or the problems that they served up in the beginning.
Yeah, you really cover it in that it's an attack from both sides. It's completely screwed up from both sides, from the top down and the bottom up. From the top down, you have, the insurance companies and the medical establishments saying you have to get a label on you in order to be able to have that treatment paid for. And that could get into a whole economical discussion about how people are reliant upon only what insurance can provide for, rather than being economically free and savvy themselves and being able to afford proper care that they need in other capacities. But then there's also, from the bottom up, people have been led to really love their labels, really cling to their diagnosis. And we could talk about why that is. In fact, let's please do, because there's been such a glamorization of mental health disorders or disease, and people are out there introducing themselves. Hi, I'm Tony. I have bipolar disorder, and I am bipolar.
I am bipolar.
Yeah, I am bipolar.
It's not I have bipolar. I wish it was I have bipolar disorder. That's at least one level away. I am bipolar is what people say.
Yeah, exactly. And people are clinging to these labels as diagnoses. They and have nothing else about them, and that's a particular contributing factor. These people out there have nothing interesting about them. They have perhaps nothing that they do, nothing that they're good at, nothing that makes them an interesting person. And so that's why they get these labels of, oh, I am ADHD. And then that's their whole personality. And that's their whole community. And that's their whole friend group and their whole online persona and their whole presence, their whole personal brand is some made up bunch of letters disorder. Meanwhile, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, for sure. So it is an alphabet soup of disorder for sure. And, we have a lot of three-letter acronyms to manage much of psychiatric symptoms, except for the classic four-letter one, the PTSD and the ADHD. Many of them are actually three letters and carry a load and carry a persona that's associated with it, carry an implied persona. So when someone says to us, I have ADHD, we get some degree of an understanding of who that person is based on what we think ADHD is.
They do.
And if someone says, oh, I have bipolar disorder, I got social anxiety, I have chronic PTSD, I have narcissistic personality disorder, I'm on the autistic spectrum, I have, generalized anxiety disorder, I got bipolar type 2, I've got agoraphobia, I've got panic disorder, blah, 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 blah.
All that means is you don't have your shit together.
Well, I don't know. I think I wouldn't go. I guess I have to keep my professional persona up a little bit to not have to be able to say exactly that line. But I think what we got here is it means something to you, that it's serving a purpose is what's really important. And whether it's a patch for not having your shit together or a capacity to actually create an identity you get to live in, whatever it is, it's pretty important to maintain when you say, I am social phobic, I am chronic PTSD, I am on the spectrum, I am whatever I say. It's very important to see that you are buying into something that calls yourself afflicted or defective or sick or ill or affected, etc. And the idea being that if you do that, one of the things that I've looked at this, is that when you make mistakes, and Zach, I've already made several mistakes this morning. It's 9:15 here. I've made a handful of mistakes, big mistakes this morning already. It's not even a special morning. It's just a morning. It's 9:15. I've made a ton of mistakes already. When we have a condition, there's something about saving our ego by being able to say, that wasn't me. That was my ADHD. That wasn't me. That was my bipolar disorder. Why did I yell at my wife? Because I got impulse control disorder. Why did I not shower? Because I must be depressed.
Yeah, and then it's like it's a cope one for failure in some regard, but it's also the biggest disservice to oneself, because then as soon as you recognize with that and say it is that because XYZ disorder, disease, whatever, that's out of my control, well, now you've completely eliminated a desire to find the root cause, fix the root cause, because nothing's random. Nothing's random. I don't subscribe to the thought that God just makes defective individuals, that people are just out here randomly, like having all these crazy things that they can't do anything about in this disempowered world. That just doesn't make sense. That's not logical. It's just foolish to me. What makes sense to me is that any bit of discomfort or unwellness or whatever is going on has a cause, perhaps several contributing factorial causes. What are they? How can we undo them, mitigate them, work to lessen those? Perhaps you will then see lessened symptoms of what you are calling ADHD, autism, any of the above, names or labels. And when people have these conversations of none of this stuff is really real, all of it's made up, all of it's perpetuated, it's just, and people get so offended as if you are attacking them and you are anti the people that claim to be afflicted by such diseases. Yeah. Meanwhile, they're not realizing that you are actually their best friend, telling them as it is. Exactly. Telling them the only route to actually solving whatever problem they're having. Exactly. It's such a mess, but people don't want to hear it. People just want to be coddled and coped and pitied and just perpetuate their eternal suffering and, lack of having to do anything about it. It's Yes, it's again pretty bluntly stated, and I have to maintain a certain decorum here. And the idea again is that people are interested in sustaining their disempowered state. It's true, and when I bring up, so sometimes I've done some recent clubhouses or some recent audio LinkedIn's or even some podcasts that really point to the idea of ending mental illness forever. I really mean it. Of course I mean it. Like transforming the narrative of mental illness on a global scale right now. In the same way that we don't blame logs for burning in the fire. Like, welcome your consideration for life. Welcome that you're disorganized. I get it. You're disorganized? No kidding. How are you expected in any way to keep this shit together? You can't.
It's coming at you so fast. Even the people who act like they've got their shit together don't. Like, you really don't have your shit together. You don't either. I don't either. You really don't. You're doing your very best. You're taking your very important steps forward, and you're putting sense in front of sense, and you're making comments and, and suggestions based on beliefs and thoughts and ideas. And it's all well and good, but it isn't like you know what you're talking about. And you really, you don't. What you know is that you don't know what you don't know. That's what you know. And there's a vast amount of information that sits out there in what you don't know that you don't know, like an endless amount of information out there. And, when we can all be a family where we can get the welcome to humanity edge, that if you're feeling imbalanced, if you're feeling dysfunctional, if you're feeling out of sorts, if you're feeling terrified, if you're feeling disempowered, welcome to humanity. And once we get that harmonic resonance you mentioned earlier with another person, instant healing takes place at that second. Instant. It doesn't even require a chronic hit. When I can get what it is that you're saying or thinking or needing or wanting or missing or desiring or wishing or any of that, when I can land with you, getting whatever your human experience is, the healing is actually bilateral. Not only am I helping you heal, but I'm healing in the process of harmonically resonating with you as a human connector.
I think that the corruption of that concept, though, has come in the form of when someone is in such a disempowered and perhaps we could say low vibrational state, they are only going to feel in harmony with other people in that state. And that's where these echo chambers of, clustered nonsense come into play. And when someone who perhaps is at, even if they don't have their self fully together, at a more healed or more healthy or more
higher vibration,
enjoyable, higher vibration state, them saying anything on that level is dissonant to the people at that lower level. So they have to want to do better and kind of get outside of their harmonic comfort in order to adopt a higher vibration. So
I don't.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, let me comment on that. I'm not positive that I agree 100% with that. Let me tell you why. I think that there's a capacity when you're in the higher vibration to understand what's going on in the lower vibration and to vibrate with it intentionally.
Yes.
I can create a space of direct, genuine authenticity with anyone at any state across the board. Now, maybe that points to my experience with 30,000 plus patients over the 45 years that I've been in the field. Maybe not. What I like to think is that you can do it, they can do it, she can do it, he can do it, anyone can do it. The idea is that you can take yourself and it doesn't matter whether they're in low or high or want to change or anything. The old joke about changing a light bulb. The idea here is that if I resonate or create a space of authentic self-expression in the face of anyone going through anything, they too will be allowed to self-actualize. Carl Rogers speaks towards the idea that everyone has a drive towards self-actualization. I'm beginning to I love Carl Rogers, by the way. I have recently been reintroduced to him, and that man is just completely brilliant. He's passed away, of course, but what an amazing psychologist he was. And this is what he spoke to, is that with positive, unconditional regard for the person that you're with, when really just being with them, no matter where they are on the spectrum of whether they're empowered or disempowered, their core self will come forward in that space, headed directly towards self-actualization. And the answers to the questions that they think they're asking are right there with them. In other words, if you have the question, I don't think he might not say exactly this, but what I'm hearing is, if you have the question, you also have the answer. And all I have to do is create the space for you to feel safe in my presence and capable of delivering your authentic self inside of that positive, unconditional regard that allows you to realize that which you're intending to explore anyways. So the part that I'm sort of maybe rebutting a little bit with you is this idea that they need to want to change. I'm not sure that's actually true. I think that I've been with people who are deeply disempowered, oh my goodness, unspeakably disempowered in psychiatric hospitals or nursing homes or who knows where, 3-quarter houses and rehab centers. And when I resonate with them, when I get them, when we connect, that healing takes place anyways. And it takes place at the same level, whether it's in a prison or in an orphanage or in a nursing home or in a rehab center or out in the community. When I connect with someone, boom, man, it's just beautiful. And that doesn't matter whatever level of care or whatever diagnosis they think they're sporting.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you from the top down, from the healer's perspective, in the ability of someone to, or when someone does have the ability to make themselves and their message tailored to whomever they're speaking to in whatever state that they are, finding them where they are, using the vocabulary that's going to, work with them, using the body language, the tone, the timing, obviously there's absolutely an art to conveying a message to an intended audience and a specific audience. So yeah, I absolutely believe in the power of someone to tailor a message, no matter how broad and how amazingly like high and empowered it is to anyone that's perhaps not in that state as a default. But that's an interesting. I appreciate your enthusiastic and optimistic perspective. Not that it's not realistic either on your or someone else's ability to really touch anyone, no matter where they are. That's interesting. Yeah. And so I kind of answers the question, but I'd love to hear it. Do you think there are people out there that perhaps are too far gone to ever be reached?
Yeah, I don't know about ever. I don't know if I would not that now that becomes the word that I'm willing to build around. I don't know about ever. There are people who can't be reached at the moment, for sure. And normally what that is they've been toxic. They've been toxified, whether it's through medications, drugs, alcohol, whatever you can get toxic right through your eyes, right through your ears. There's plenty of stuff on the internet. If you watch it for a while, you will be toxic, guaranteed. If you listen, there's things that you can hear and actually be around. And if you hear it and it rolls around in that noggin of yours, you're toxic. It's just the way it is. You're toxic. I'm toxic. It's not even a protection. There's not really a protection. It's a straight shot towards toxicity, as if you were to drink 180 proof alcohol. This is really just an opportunity to get that normal. And see, that's the thing inside of psychiatry, at least one way to look at the possible negative influence of being inside the conventional psychiatric system is once you have your diagnosis, that's when the treatment initiates, right? You start getting the treatment. And from a psychiatric standpoint, I think you and I talked about this in our pre-podcast meeting. The idea is that once you get started on your treatment, now you've been given a medication that is intended to imbalance you. It's intended to imbalance you. Now it's not sold as an imbalancing agent. It's sold as a rebalancing agent. But if you weren't out of balance in the first place and it takes you into a new level of imbalance, you now have that chemical imbalance that you thought you had before you got here. You didn't have it. But if this drug is actually giving you an honest to goodness physiological imbalance, you now are chemically imbalanced. That's imbalance. That's the whole point of this. And once you have that, you get to declare yourself as being out there too far. It's sort of true. So sometimes like, working in the institutions that I've just named, like the inpatient units of the nursing homes or the prisons, the jails, et cetera, you get somebody who's on too much medicine, or even too much can be just 1 teaspoon, by the way. It doesn't have to be 4, 6, 12 medicines, although there's plenty of people who are on 4, 6, or 12 medicines. There's also people who are on 1 medicine and are on too much medicine. And once you get that group, you can see that group can be, sort of glossy and not available, impenetrable, difficult to connect with. And so that's why I take the word ever out. Can you detoxify somebody? Absolutely. Someone can become detoxified from both medicines and from the toxicity that the world has to offer. Then they become available.
Yeah, the pharmaceutical approach is like fighting red fire with blue fire. You're still on fire. You're just on fire in a different way. Even if you get rid of all the red fire, now you're on fire blue. It's like you have a cockroach infestation. You bring in a bunch of ants to eat the cockroaches. Now you have an ant infestation. Like you can't, that's not really a solution in the long term in a holistic sense. Yes, you got rid of the cockroaches. You have treated the symptoms maybe, but now what else is all the issues? But I want to touch on something that you said, because I think you used a bit of disempowered language a little bit ago. So let's back up a little bit. You
Sure.
said there are a lot of toxic messages out there, right? And we're talking about in the form of media, social media, movies,
Yeah.
news, overhearing conversations, hearing other people even talking
Yeah.
directly to you, saying unhealthy things. And you said there's a straight shot with no protections.
That's
I
right.
don't think that's necessarily true. I think if people are existing unconsciously, going about their day, not really thinking about how they're thinking, not really thinking about what's affecting them, they are susceptible to just receiving whatever the messages are that they are exposed to. However, I will argue that if someone is existing in a state of consciousness and true awareness and true kind of understanding or understanding of themselves and the world around them and how they are navigating it, when they are exposed to messages, though they might face a barrage of bullets, they will then have that bulletproof vest of consciousness on to be able to filter out, no, I see what that's
Okay.
doing to me.
We are actually on the same page here. What I'm suggesting is that it takes that as a secondary response to the toxicity that otherwise has a straight shot. Once you recognize it as toxicity, you can then respond to block. You can respond to recreate or to transmute or to alchemize whatever's coming your way. You can do that, but it's going to land, and then you're going to have to recognize it as that's what it is. And now I need to do something to keep it out of here because it's got the alien through the belly button chance of getting right there to my soul. And I'm going to have to do something about that.
That's a good point. And that's a good way you put it, because yes, even if you are aware of these things, they do land. So you do need to manage your exposure or manage, okay, my armor is depleting and now I need to recharge. I need to get away from this. Now I can't handle that anymore. Or like, okay, now I'm good. I can be around this if it makes sense, or if there's other reasons for me to be around this right now. That's important to kind of monitor your battery level of resilience to what's going on. And to put it at a very basic example for someone that's not necessarily comprehending the language that I'm using, it's no secret that a lot of music, especially perhaps hip hop and rap music, has horrible messaging in it. It's crime, it's murder, it's this, it's that, it's bad stuff. I still love it. I still love it a lot of the time. And I'm able to listen to it and like kind of, I'll feed off that high energy of it and just enjoy it. But then there are times where I'm like, oh my God, this is too much. Because I recognize, yes, there is a lot of negativity in there. And I'll monitor my internal battery and say, no, that's enough right now, to put it at a very simple level. But the same goes for dealing, with negative individuals, being in negative, toxic situations, whether that is physically toxic or we are kind of talking about mentally toxic as well. It's important, even if you are a resilient individual, to manage your exposure and have that awareness to not deplete your own armored batteries, because at the end of that battery, well, now you are going to be just as susceptible to someone who is otherwise very susceptible to these things.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we're on the same page here. We've found our own resonance. That's exactly right. The idea is that if you have your consciousness up, then you can recognize toxicity. You can see that you've been thrown off your center. And by being thrown off your center, you can then rebalance yourself naturally by by really being conscious, by really getting when is it that you're at your highest power? When is it that you're resonating with source? When is it that rather than resonating with the invitation to resonate again with the lower power, the lower frequency toxicity that we're talking about, whether that be through porn or whether that be through hip hop or whether that be through toxic individuals or to certain circumstances that present themselves in ways to throw you off balance should you not protect yourself.
Yeah, and so I posed the question earlier of what we thought the average state of someone's mental health or mental health overall as a society is. I think we both agree, even without it being said, that it is quite abysmal. It's horrible. It's very bad. Most average people have a very awful time within their own mind and within the world around them. But what would you say are some of the biggest offenders of creating that scenario and creating this, chaotic world that we see in modern times?
Yeah, I think that there's some very real offenders. I think actually the internet is a massive offender, meaning I think that our phone addictions are, our collective phone addiction at this point is extraordinary. And we are just getting blasted with what we think is news, and it's being delivered in such a way, whether it's news or visual entertainment or reels, algorithmic related presentations in any of the in any of the systems or platforms that we visit. I mean, we're so silly. We think that me and you are meeting right now. We're not meeting at all. We're both just staring at a flat screen. I mean, that's all that's happening. We are pretending to meet through a pixelated flat screen. And, we think we're hearing each other. Actually, we're not even hearing each other at all. We're hearing an electronic representation of what it is that we sound like. We think we're seeing each other. We're not. I know that I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at what is it? Several million pixelated light bulbs. That's what I'm looking at. And they represent you. And we actually treat our screens like they're real. And frankly, I am, yesterday I took 24 hours away from my screen yesterday. I didn't carry my phone with me. I didn't get on the computer from 7 p.m. Friday to 7:30 p.m. I actually lasted 24 and a half hours without looking at a screen. And it was, I've used cocaine before. I've watched porn sites before. I've, drank enough alcohol before. I've done a lot of things that were marginally or really addicting in my life. I don't think there's an addiction that's more powerful, that there's ever been an addiction more powerful right now than the human addiction to virtual screens. And there's massive impact of toxicity inside of those.
I'm going to push back a little bit, because is the internet and is technology inherently an offender, or is it simply an amplifier? Is it simply a very, very powerful tool to amplify your life in whatever direction, and your tendencies and your existence in whatever they might be in its current state? Because for every bit of unhealthiness that you can dive into on the internet, there's also some great stuff. Someone can actually now more than ever get access to all of the healthy messaging around the world about different mental health things, about different physical health things, find different healthy communities to exist in. These are now, through these screens, actually more possible avenues than ever before, and people can explore the positive side of things now more than the negatives to whatever they like. Now, of course, we have to consider who's overseeing the different technologies and who's pushing what and who has, the ability to promote negative things more than positive things. But as a consumer, and especially a conscious consumer, I do think that we have the choice to use technology and use the internet as a massive positive to our lives.
For sure, man. Absolutely. And I'm not denying that at all. But when you talk about a direct offender, there's also other questions that we sometimes gloss over. For instance, when you're spending your time looking at communities in France that you're connected to, or communities in Nairobi that you can make an impact in, or something like that, or, specific niche level communities that are curious about the similar things that you are. What are you not doing out here on the real planet too? And that's another question. What are you spending time with your wife? Are you spending time with your kids? Are you spending time in nature? Are you drinking enough water? Are you eating enough food? Are you keeping yourself physically fit? Are you, some of the things we tend to set aside because we get so caught up in the brilliance, the sheer and total brilliance of what the internet has to bring, because it's not just the internet, because here comes AI, and here comes, AI, and not even here comes AI. It's been here a while. And, we have a lot of AI impact. And, we start looking at the future, the cosmic future of what AI now has to bring. The new impact of what's coming around the corner that's going to make ChatGPT look small, look like a tiny kindergartner. It's just incredible what's around the corner, and we don't know how to keep up with all that. And of course, it's completely compelling, and of course, we get to get out there and see and learn so many things that we never had access to. But when we really start looking at, like the quantum level leaps and in fact quantum AI that's coming around the corner, what's it really doing with us as we're being programmed to be cyborgs? I mean, that's really what's happening. And what's that do to our mental health? What was there back when we were in the farms versus what's here now that we are quantumly, being programmed each and every day as sheer and total cyborgs? Is it really better? It's a really important question. Yes, it sure appears that we have access to greater, beautiful things all over the planet. But what happened to that little dandelion you used to be able to stare at and appreciate? We're not doing that so much anymore. We think that being in a niche in Nairobi is way more powerful than staring at, the top level of a tulip, when really there might be something at the top level of a tulip that we're bypassing. It may not be better and bigger, and it may be. It's also true. I couldn't be more aligned with what you're saying. Part of the reason I'm addicted to this shit is that there's so much incredible stuff happening out here.
Yeah. And it's certainly a question that there might not be one solution to, but I do like to talk about, solutions or actionables that we can do kind of about these crazy things. What would you say to someone that finds themselves so engulfed in the internet that perhaps the other areas of their life that are essential are suffering?
All right. So here's my commitment. My commitment is 1 day a week. I'm off. I'd love to create that day for everybody. I said this yesterday. It was painful, dude. By hour 21, I was like, okay, only 3 more hours. I just have to go to 7 p.m. I can do this. I know I can do it. And I got, I'm like, what could I do instead? I guess I could read a book. Imagine that. I could go pet my cat. Like, imagine that. I could go take a walk. You know what I did? I took a nap. I'm like, oh, I took a nap. It was like a super healthy nap. I got down into under my covers and actually took a nap in my bed. It felt very valuable. And it was in some ways a response to the fact I didn't know what the hell else to do. It was really interesting. So I invite people, no kidding, to take a hiatus. Maybe once a week is too much for most people. I think it is, actually. I think if we actually enforce a 24-hour period every single week where you are off your internet, like totally no screens, we'd get massive pushback. People go, no, I'm not doing that. Now, if we remember that week, the whole idea of a week, that 7 days, it's not a real time frame. There's nothing really happens in 7 days isn't even a real cycle. There's nothing really to it. It's all biblical. 7 days is the 7 days that God took to create the world. That's how the 7 days ever got its orientation. On the 7th day, what did the dude do?
Rest.
He stopped it, man. He stopped. And I invite us to do the same thing with the internet. So I'd like to, and that was what I did, yesterday, like I said, and I think the impact was really seeing what was I missing? What, really, I walked home an hour and a half from the place I spent the morning at, and it was through the rain. I had, my hat on and I was slipping and sliding in the mud. And there was something deeply valuable about doing that instead of like Ubering, which would have taken a phone, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's, of course, everything's nuanced and there's always an individual whole persona to consider in an actionable and what's the best steps. I don't think there's necessarily one prescription that we could write for that for all of people, because I'll give my personal experience. I lived a lot of years being a lot more offline oriented and being more time in nature and stuff, and all of that's fantastic, and it served me to some degrees then for a lot of like inner contemplation. Where I'm at in life now is I'm on a screen more than I sleep. I'm on my screen more than I'm doing anything. But I am actually living a more fulfilled and enjoyable existence now than I was during those times, because when I'm on these screens, I am getting things done that are helping me build my digital empire, that are going to help me free myself, my family, and help everything kind of go the way I need it to go, that I'll be able to do more things. But that said, I monitor my battery and know, okay, I need a nap. Okay, I need to take a bath. I need to walk the dogs. I need to do this. And so that's why anytime I'm advising someone on a just personal level, I consider what do they want to get out of life? Because if we don't understand what we are aiming for, how could we at all understand how to calibrate ourselves to take steps in that direction? If you're someone that wants to work a job and, go home and spend time with your family and do whatever, yes, go probably spend the weekend as offline as you can. And that's probably going to be the best for your mental health. But of course, if you are someone that's trying to build something for XYZ reasons, and that's essential and a healthy endeavor that you're partaking in, there's sacrifices that we make in certain things. And that's not necessarily even a question for you. I'm just kind of posing it to the audience, a contrary perspective, because in the mental health conversation, it's very glamorized itself, even to say, go spend time in nature, go disconnect, go do this, go do that. But then perhaps you'd find more fulfillment in just rearranging what you're doing on those screens.
Yeah.
It's an interesting conversation.
It is an interesting conversation. What I noticed again when I was doing back in the day, I was observing the seventh day fairly regularly, and I was much more productive. And that studies will show that much more productive during the week when I had that seventh day off. So the idea of, okay, I'm building an empire, therefore I'm going to work on the Sabbath or work on my seventh day off. I'm just going to work on right through my nights, right through my days. Right. It does not create a greater sense of productivity by doing that. So it has been shown over and over again that when you take that seventh day off, you get more done during the week as a whole. So your point is well taken, and I'm certainly drawn to it as well. I don't, this taking the day off yesterday was, it was an albatross. I hadn't done that. I don't think I had done that actual thing since like my vision quest, and actually doing it had such a large impact where I really also then got to feel how powerful the algorithms are. Like my Spotify algorithm, like, dude, what the hell is up with Spotify? Like Spotify hits the next song for me. And I think all of us better than I could have picked it. Like it's so great. That algorithm is like, I could be a slave if you would serve me up Spotify. That's the way I feel.
Yeah, there's a lot of times where I'm listening to a song and for some reason in my head, I'm already thinking about another song.
And it shows up.
That actually ends up being up next. It's really cool.
It is crazy. Yeah.
It's really cool, honestly.
Yeah, it is.
Or sometimes it'll create playlists for you now. Like, here, Zach, here is your autumn evening playlist. And I'm like, wow,
right.
I want to hear all this right now.
Exactly. It's pretty remarkable. Pretty remarkable how they know us better than we know us. And it's really, we can still smile about it. Whatever they've done, if they have invaded us at that level and have us still being able to joke and be jovial about it rather than feel raped and intruded upon.
Hey, but what else can you do, right? What's the more productive option?
That's all you can do. That's all you can do.
You laugh about it and enjoy what there is to enjoy and obviously consciously monitor to not succumb to the negatives as much as possible. But,
exactly.
And that's an important thing because you have all these dorks out here crying and bitching and moaning, AI, it's bad, it's evil, it's going to take over. All right, well, they said the same thing about the internet. It's still here to stay. Are you still complaining about it? Are you wasting your time all that time? If so, AI's here. It's here to stay. It's only going to get more. You can bitch and moan about it all you want. Or you can learn how to live with the inevitabilities and optimize your life in use of them. It's, there's always the people that, say, this is evil, this is evil, this is evil. Okay, well, this is reality. Welcome to
it's reality. Condition of the game. It's one way to look at it. Condition of the game. It is reality, and it might be evil, and it might, in fact, take down humanity. It's not outside the realm that it could do that. And so what? It's still here. Either way, it's here. And we got, you got a life to live. Embrace it all. Welcome to humanity.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, all right, we've covered technology. We've covered the internet. What else is going on? What are some of the other big offenders of mental health, would you say?
Yeah, I think another big offender is thinking that there's something wrong with us. This idea that we've already touched on, this idea that when we're unhappy, that means that there's something wrong with us. When we're somehow not living in joy, there's something wrong with us. When we, and what I mean by something wrong with us is that we're carrying one of those alphabet soup diagnoses with our life, that we've been affected or afflicted from the outside of having some sort of condition that prevents us from living a life we would live if we didn't have that condition. Now, The truth is, maybe there's nothing wrong with you. And maybe there's nothing wrong with us. And maybe there just really isn't. And I would say that that's maybe the number one offender, is falling as prey into the idea that if you're uncomfortable, that's your problem. There's something wrong with you. Rather than getting that discomfort is a significant contributor to being in this life. You've already mentioned that. This idea of, being occasionally miserable or even being regularly miserable, it's not a new product in this life of ours. Buddha sat under that tree for a really long time, and he worked everything out except for misery. The dude sat there for a while. He worked it all out except for misery, and decided that misery is part of life. He couldn't work that one out. That's just how that's just the truth. And, a lot of people pay attention to Buddha and all of his teachings, and with good reason. I love it too. And there's no reason not to love it. It's fantastic stuff. And the idea that misery is part of life didn't go away. And there's never been a time in humanity, if we look back at the writings or the contribution of our ancestors, where misery wasn't a critical piece of what was going on in people's lives. It's always been the most miserable that it's ever been. It's just gotten a little more miserable. It's always been, minute by minute, the most miserable it's ever been. These are the best of times and worst of times, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. All things are what we make of them. And I think all of our emotions are here to serve us, and all of the states that we experience are here for us to learn from, because they all tell us something. If you are truly miserable more of the time than you are fulfilled or satisfied or joyous or in a state of gratitude, or in a state that you'd otherwise describe as positive or more enjoyable, that is supposed to be there to indicate to you, hey, something you're doing isn't right. Yeah. I don't know what it is. Is it you're not eating right? Is it you're around the wrong people? Is it your job is not right? Is it you're just this, that, the other? You're something's going on that's creating. It's not itself a problem. It is the indicator.
Yeah.
It's like a little indicator, check engine light on yourself as a human here. If you feel these negative emotions more than you feel positive or contented emotions, they're supposed to be there. If they weren't there, people would just continue to descend into horrible and even worse lives, because they just be numb to it, which is something that happens. A lot of people go numb, and then they ignore the indicator, they ignore the indicator, they ignore the indicator, they keep doing the same thing, expecting they're going to get a different results other than further misery, until their soul just kind of calluses over and they just kind of go numb to life. It's crazy. But yeah, any response to that?
Yeah, it just seems that, this idea of really embracing the unembraceable and accepting the uncomfort, like actually moving towards discomfort as a way of living life, and really getting that you don't need to run away from discomfort. It's okay to actually acknowledge it and treat it as an indicator for what's going on in your life. It's okay to actually, when I say welcome to humanity, the importance of welcome to humanity is getting that you can embrace the unembraceable. You can respect the unrespectable. You can actually speak the unspeakable. You can manage this as part of the smorgasbord of life, as part of, when we look at the Brazilian restaurant salad bar, if you've ever been to one of those things, there's so much, those salad bars are like acres, man. There's like so much food there. And some of it is really great, and others that you just tend to avoid. When you start seeing that life has misery as part of it, and it's okay to embrace that as well, and really just capture that you can even love the discomfort as being part of life. So you can have gratitude and be grateful for the pain that you're having. Not that you should wish it upon yourself or anyone else, but pain, when treated as an indicator, is a tremendous tool. The idea that you can shift, that it's an invitation to shift the way you're looking at life, to bring, joy, gratitude, peace, etc., into your life that you're living.
Yeah. There's one thing that I think we've left out of the equation that is one of the biggest offenders in an overall mental framework that sets society up for failure as a whole in these modern times. And that is that modern times try to perpetuate the concept that men and women in our lives and in our heads are at all the same. And all this discussion has not been gendered so far, but yet I'm a man, you're a man. And I think a lot of the conversation that we've been having has been using language that really only applies to men in a healthy way. I think there's a way of living that leads to fulfillment and then happiness as a byproduct from that fulfillment for men. But I think that's massively different for women, actually. And when we're using the language of leaning into the discomfort, leaning into the pain, getting yourself into those scenarios to thrive within them, I think that applies to men. But I would never advise necessarily a woman to do the same in a lot of the regards I would men. Do you want to touch on how men and women are treated, perhaps in the profession of mental health, and then perhaps you give your thoughts on how you see the mental health of a man versus a woman?
Oh my gosh.
Personal side.
All right, let's keep staying on the small topics and see what we can do with this one. Men and women are different. I don't think there's any question about that. But, life has changed a lot recently in this area, too. There's been massive revolutions inside of the whole notion of binary, how people see men and what is a man, what is a woman, and how different, that we all carry the masculine, we carry the feminine, that there's all the, transitioning going on or self, how we're, gender identity issues that are really critical in this world of ours. And there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a lot of shifting going on in how the society is taking on what a man and a woman really are. No, when I said I made a lot of mistakes this morning already, part of that was having this really rich discussion with my wife, who was lying next to me in bed as we woke up this morning, as she does, nearly every morning. Thank God I get to sleep with such a beautiful woman, such a fine example of what it is to be a feminine species. That's my partner. It's fantastic. And are we even close to the same? And
Fred's trying to keep his license here, everybody.
We're not the same. We're not the same. My wife and I are not the same. And the whole idea here is that, I don't know about leaning into discomfort. In some ways, the whole leaning into discomfort thing is a feminine push initially. And the idea being that really life is uncomfortable. Life is uncomfortable. Giving birth, for instance, I suspect is very uncomfortable. And, even dealing with men is uncomfortable. If you're a woman, dealing with kids and all the things that have to be juggled in life is very uncomfortable. And there's a level of beauty, like we can learn from women on how they handle life's discomforts, and oftentimes not at the helm of creating the discomfort. Like actually men created the flipping discomfort, and they have to live in a life that we created, full of nonsense and chaos and war and, opposition and offensive aspects of what it is for men to hit up on other men. And the world that got created inside of the patrilineal, component of what it is to be a human in present Western society, for instance. Inside the mental health field, I think that there's powerful women psychiatrists and psychologists and social workers, very powerful. And I think that they can often be heard and respected at least a similar stature as the men in the field. And oftentimes, the clients or the patients, they want to pick a certain, a certain sexual preference for their therapist or for their doctor. Like they think, oh yeah, I need to talk to a woman, or I need to see a male therapist or something like this. I think that how we see men and women, this thing that you're talking about, that we, treat a man who says something very similar to what a woman says something, is, I think there's so much discovery that's still available. I like to protect my women. I like to keep my women secure. Same with my wife. That's my job. That's what I feel like is a primary job, is to have my wife feel safe and protected and secure in my presence, as much as I can. It's a rough world. It's rough. I can't keep every raindrop off of her, for sure. But I do feel like it's my job to keep her safe and secure. And when that happens, we have a much happier life. And safe and secure from me as well, from the bullshit that is me. Now, my clumsy, wretched nature is also part of the things that she has to contend with. What is the difference between men and women? I think that we have, there's inherent differences going all the way back. If you go all the way back to the Bible, we can go all the way back to the Garden of Eden. What's going on back there when Adam needs a helper? What's really goes on? What and how has life proceeded in the thousands of years since that story was designed? I kind of feel like I'm shirking a little bit. I think you're asking is like, what are the differences inside of the profession or inside of how we treat clients or patients? And then, and when you start looking again at the ambiguous nature, the non-binary neurodivergent folks, it becomes even more difficult, not only with the pragmatics of keeping our pronouns straight, because that's already challenging enough. I'm not built to use the word they when talking about one other person. I don't know how to do that. I don't naturally do that, even if that's, and I don't mean to offend anybody. If I don't call you they, I almost feel like you don't have a right to be offended by that, because when I grew up, they is a plural. They is two people. They is not you. And the idea that I have to call you they, or you're gonna be offended by it, is really a difficult process. But I really get it. What has happened in nature is that the non-binary, neurodivergent, ambiguous gender identity, people who are exploring that, is a natural outcome of where we are in society, looking at the difference or the sameness between men and women. That I was meant to be different than I am, and now I'm going to become that. It becomes it's a really challenging concept to swallow, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you did a good job holding on to your license there. But I will preface anything I say right now with my thoughts and opinions do not reflect that of Dr. Fred Moss here. And of course, they are what they are. But yeah, you nailed it within there, that men have created the world as we see it today, for better or for worse, because welcome to humanity, men shape the world. That just is what it is. That's just the way things are. That's the way they've always been. That's the way they're always going to be. You could like it. You could not like it. Doesn't matter. I don't care. World doesn't care. That's just how things are. Men shape the world. What does that mean? When men shape the world in an empowered state, with in mind protecting their women and protecting their children and protecting the men, women, and children of society, then we see good things happening. When men, for whatever reason, have allowed the world to succumb to such a chaotic state and have themselves, in a large regard, become chaotic, or when the good men have allowed the chaotic bad men to run amok for too long, then we see what we see today, in the sense that the women aren't protected, the children aren't protected, then their mental health suffers. Then it's this crazy ping pong back and forth after that. But in your language, you did basically allude to that. It all comes back to how men have allowed the world to become it. I wholeheartedly agree with that. For better or for worse, I think all of it falls back on the backs of men, and it's crazy. Yeah, the whole gender garbage nonsense, we don't even have to go into. I think everyone knows what that is. But yeah, the conversation of masculinity versus femininity is one that I really enjoy posing to a lot of my guests, because I think in this ambiguous gender neutral soup that everyone's trying to be forced in is the root of so many of the issues that we see today. Because you can't go against nature and expect to get good results in any way. And biologically, men are men and women are women. And that's the way it always has been. And that's the way it always will be. And I don't care what arguments, excuses, and nonsense people purport. When you try to disconnect from such an inherent and innate structure of the world, of families, of individuals. There's no way for that to not sow chaos. And I, of course, feel for anyone that is feeling confusion and feeling toxicity within themselves and feeling mentally and physically unhealthy to a state that they, have no idea what's going on and turn to such things and such craziness. But that doesn't change the truth of the matter that, when men behave as men and women behave as women, then they are probably set up to be the most fulfilled and happy and enjoyable in their existence as humanly possible. And in celebrating what makes a man and what makes a woman, it's a very beautiful thing, and people can really thrive. And that's where the whole conversation gets crazy, because there's been a conflating of, a man being this stereotypical kind of jerk and being conflated with the bad side of, or the potentially dark side of masculinity. And the conversation is often quiet about all of the beautiful things of being a man. And the conversation of women acting in their feminine and being in a feminine frame as they go through life is a very beautiful thing. And the conversation has been not for a lot of time been on the positive side of a woman behaving like a woman. And it's kind of been hyperbolized, the negative sides of things, and kind of conflated with a bunch of negative traits for a woman to be acting in a feminine frame. And it, obviously correlation isn't causation. There's always a lot of contributory factors, but look at the pushes of men not being like men anymore and women not being like women anymore. Has the world gotten worse, or has the world gotten better in that time? You tell me. But you bring up an interesting conversation. I didn't even mention that, I don't think, but in regards to practitioners. And again, my thoughts and opinions are only that of myself, but I would strongly advise someone to consider, in their finding of a mental health practitioner, finding a male practitioner that is a very good example of a mental health practitioner. Does that mean I dislike female mental health practitioners or think that there are no good ones out there? No. But if we go back to studying the innate differences between men and women, I believe that men are more solutions-oriented and women are more situation-oriented. And I think on a large scale, if you are to go and attend a mental health practitioner that is going to be more likely to talk through the situation, feelings, you're not necessarily going to get as better as you could if someone is there and shooting you straight saying, hey, this is the problem, this is how you fix it. Now, obviously, there's the whole conversation of the mental health profession in a whole. Again, all things are nuanced. There's great examples in all regards, but it's a very interesting thing. How men and women are quite different, and that's unavoidable, no matter who has a problem with that.
Yeah, there's several different ways to take on what you just said. And, Tom, a little bit with the Carl Rogers approach is positive unconditional regard we talked about, and, and Jung and Freud and, Kohut and some of the, the EMDR people or the CBT people, the, cognitive behavioral therapy people or the dialectics. There's just so many different approaches. There's as many different approaches these days as there are different forms of gender identity, I suspect. And what we really have here is an opportunity to see that some people, this idea, I'm going to have a discussion with you, show you what's wrong, and then deliver you the solution, can work for some people. But this idea, again, like Carl does, is just kind of create a space and have you grow within it in a nurturant way. So I certainly wouldn't say that having there's something to be said about a nurturant masculine figure as a therapist. I think it's rather rare to have somebody who's a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more nurturant, a little bit more capable of listening, receiving, and then incorporating and then creating a space for growth and development inside of the therapeutic alliance. It does take something to do that from a masculine standpoint. You have to, but what it takes is having tapped into whatever the feminine aspect is of being that man and being able to be receptive and being able to listen, being able to be nurturant. and being able to connect. And those are not necessarily the traits that are inherently considered masculine in the yin-yang way. So I would also suspect that the opposite is also true, that if you can find a woman who's more solution focused or more, like someone who has crossed over and really got the whole human aspect of this a little bit more, has done the work, if you will, and incorporated all of their being, including the masculine, feminine components, not necessarily binarily, but I don't even mean to preface it that way, like really getting the masculine and feminine components at least explored somewhat in their own life. Then you get somebody who's probably more capable of assisting anyone dealing with any kind of picture. So if you've been around the block and done the work as a clinician, you've done the work, meaning on yourself as a clinician, as someone who can hear and someone who can listen and someone who can be called on to bring forth what it is that's being asked for. What's being requested from the universe? What is being called for? Then I think you're going to get better results as a client.
Yeah, and that's the biggest qualifier right there. Whether it is a man, whether it is a woman, someone that is themselves in a healed state, in a fulfilled state of having done their inner work, whatever that needs to have been, and kind of comprehends themselves at a deep, deep and truthful level. Only that person will ever be able to truly lead someone into success more, or maybe more guarantee it. Can people shoot in the dark and hit their target? Yes. But whether it is a man, whether it is a woman, someone that is a healthier example of either of those is going to innately be able to offer a higher vibrational guiding scope than either sex that is themselves just a mess. So that's
and this would be a good time for me to plug my most recent podcast, which is called The Healthy Healer, which is exactly based on that. Exactly. All my guests come into the program with that being an understood prerequisite. The idea that they have done the work, they have had a life, they've been around the block, they actually know themselves as a rich and honest level to create a genuine, authentic core space for the conversation to exist safely and to explore what it is that's seeking to emerge. What is really seeking to emerge, and can I tap it? What is it inside of the conversation, inside of the communication, that is being called on to step up and assist in optimizing one's life?
That's awesome. So if I'm correct in comprehending, that podcast is you hosting and you have on guests that are themselves mental health professionals that you have already vetted and
Correct.
kind of consider them to be at least at a baseline presenting level, a positive figure to be able to work with.
Yep, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's super cool. That's a really, really interesting scope for a podcast. I would definitely recommend someone that is considering working with a mental health professional to check that out, because you never know who you're going to resonate with. And I guess the beautiful thing again about these screens is, though a guest that you really like might not be there with you, someone might be able to work with you as a health professional over, online, FaceTime, Zoom, this, that, the other.
Almost everybody these days is at least using that as their standard. Not very many people, we had this 3-year hiatus where office visits were kept to a minimum, and most people then just morphed into being able to deliver their services, or pretending anyways to deliver their services online.
Yeah, that's super cool. And would you want to talk about a little about what your vetting process is for people that you consider having on there? How strict are you in kind of getting to know them to make sure that there's someone that you want to platform in that way?
I probably could be stricter, but really I just have the the invitations are out there on Podmatch and at different other spaces, and people then fill out a jot form that comes with hitting the I'm interested button, and they have a few questions to ask, like how it is, why do you call yourself this or that, and how did you get to be this or that, and what are some of your special attributes, and they answer that, and then I sort through it every few weeks and take a look at the people that are best likely to serve my listening audience, and then ask them to come on. And I don't do a pre-interview like I know that you do and many people do. I probably could and should. It's very rare that I get a dud. However, I did have a dud this year where I was like, whoa, what a waste of time this conversation is. And that person just didn't get aired, and they don't know that they didn't get aired, but they're not going to get aired. That's not going to happen. But it was only one. I think I'm on podcast number 120 at this point. So it's, one out of 100. We do 2 podcasts per week where I interview the client or interview the guest on one of the podcasts, and then I do a little single short on the second. So 120 podcasts is actually only 60 different guests.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And you want to touch on the other podcasts that you do? You could, by all means.
So I've done a couple other podcasts. My original podcast was surprisingly called Welcome to Humanity. And I had another 120 great interviews back in the day. That was started, I think, in 2020, or maybe it was 2019. And there's just some fabulous interviews in that. I love that. That was where I really learned how to be a podcast host, was on that particular show. And you can, I've been interviewed many people from all walks of life, just spotlighting people to be way greater than what most people thought that they were, from artists to musicians to clinicians to just people up to really cool things in the world, writers. And it was fun. I really, really liked the Welcome to Humanity podcast. And that went dormant for a little while. My friend and I put together a sort of a sideshow podcast, a little bit more raucousy, called Insanity. That was Sam Morris and me. That was 2 words, Insanity. And we interviewed some massive rock stars, and this place got a lot more raucousy. It was a lot more sort of R-rated, and really exploring the fun and dark side of what it means to be a really interesting person. And we had really, really interesting people on that show. We only did about 15 or 20 shows, and it can be found on YouTube and the Insanity section. And then the third one is here. And I've been a guest, I think, 150 times or so. So I get to speak like this. And of all of those, from the 3 podcasts, Welcome to Humanity, Insanity, and The Healthy Healer, and being a guest, I enjoy being a guest the most. I just think that it's great. It's great to be on your show. It's great to be introduced to a bunch of new listeners. It's great to have great conversations. It's great to explore. I love answering questions, and you can't stump. There's almost like, you're not going to stump me, even if you bring on this, like, a powerful question about gender identity. It's like,
it's a lot less work too. You get to just kind of go and have fun. It's more of a playground when you can, just kind of answer the questions. It's fun. Yeah. So something else that you do is that you sell a course, and that's called True Voice, your true voice. Mm-hmm. You could talk about that, but I'd love to hear, what does that mean? What is someone's true voice, and why do people need to be connected with their true voice? Why are they disconnected from it? Good question.
So the True Voice course is what it's called. TrueVoiceCourse.com is where you can find that course. And the second book I wrote, is called Find Your True Voice. And that also can be found on drfred360.com. And you can find it in truevoicebook.com if you want to go directly to the book. But anyways, what is a true voice? This idea of resonating harmonically with someone is sort of like, if we use a tuning fork as a metaphor, we're going to want to be at our solid vibration. And over time, we have all learned how to really pretend to be people that we're not, in order to protect the people that we are. So we've really all done that, and we've done that since a very young age. Rather than actually presenting ourselves honestly to ourselves, we have learned how to try to be someone that we're not, how to try to be someone in order to fit a mold, in order to fit what someone else would want. And so we pretended that, and the crack in the cement has got larger and larger, and we never really went back to fix it. So I think it's Henry David Thoreau who said, the mass of men go through life in quiet desperation and then go to their grave with their song still in them. And I think that's what we're talking about here, is getting through life and having nobody actually get to know who you are. If you're going to connect with somebody, you're going to have to be, it's sort of like right on the heels of what we were just saying. You're going to have to be in touch with your real, honest, true, authentic, core, genuine self. You're at least as close as you can. And this is a lifelong, you don't been there, done that thing. This is not an arrival thing. This is an ongoing journey, because we're so much of us, we are afraid to actually present ourselves to people. We are instead present ourselves as a persona. We present ourselves as a way of protecting whatever it is our soft, delicate underbellies. And, I like actually speaking a core self, actually being in touch with your core self, and then presenting that through your communication style, whether that be through speaking and listening, or whether that be through maybe the arts, or creativity, art, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, gardening, those kinds of things. It really is critical that if you're going to resonate with somebody, you're going to have to find that human vibration. That human vibration that's at the center of you, that's the same one that's at the center of him and her too. And when you get to that, when you find your true voice, you really have an opportunity to then be with other people and get your messages heard, but also be able to hear other people who might be as diametrically opposed to you in various really important areas of life. Like, can you align with somebody who's diametrically opposed to you in some of the areas that are really important to you? There's divisive areas, and you've noticed, right? There's a little bit of divisiveness in society, and there's an opportunity to really let people go because you disagree with how they think about a particular issue. But if you're really going to get to the bottom nature of what humanity is about, you're going to see that the greatest threat in the world is not what you think. It's actually not COVID. It's actually not racism. It's actually not war. It's not sex trafficking. The greatest threat in the world is that we are not using and accepting other people's true voices as a way of getting to communication together. Why do I say that? Because in order to deal with any of the topics we just named, war, sex trafficking, racism, COVID, any of the other threats to society, the calamities that are out here, we're going to have to communicate with people who disagree with us. And we're going to have to communicate with people who agree with us and actually take into consideration the concerns of all relevant parties. And in order to do that, we're going to have to come in touch with our true voice. If we don't, let's put a fork in it, because this shit's over.
I think where that gets very muddied is that a lot of society is not operating with their true voice, like you mentioned. And so when people are perhaps in disagreement with a particular stance, well, perhaps they are only perpetuating some ideas because they've been disempowered and programmed with this garbage nonsense ideology that isn't indicative of their true voice. So how can someone have conversation who's coming from a perspective of having their true voice and having an aligned existence when you're just talking to a bunch of Agent Smiths, if you're familiar with it?
This is actually the second time that we've addressed this in this conversation, which I really want you to get that. It's the idea, again, is that when you resonate at the core vibration of humanity, you can get to them too.
But that's a different thing. Because we've talked about, you mentioned accepting the opposing view. Well, what if that opposing view is just downright harmful and unnatural?
Well, it's unclear that that you're not just making that up in the first place. And number two, my wife asked me a very similar question this morning. Very, very similar, in fact, very interesting. And she said, from a psychiatric, she doesn't usually do this, but from a psychiatric standpoint, she asked me a question very similar to what you're asking. And, I think that what I conjecture is that when you get to that space underneath the nonsense and actually connect with the human that's there, creating a space for authenticity and genuine high vibration capacity to exist, not higher than human, just high enough to be human, like actually getting the brotherhood or the fraternal nature of my vibration and your vibration, whether you believe that bullshit or whether I believe this bullshit, whatever it is, if you're causing harm to society, I know one thing at the start of this, which is more than anything, you want to be heard. More than anything, you want to be heard. I don't care if you're Joseph Stalin, Adolf Hitler. I don't care who you are. What you want more than anything is to be heard for who you are. What other capacity do I have? If you're Joseph Stalin, if you're Adolf Hitler, if you're, I don't know, whoever your next evil dude is or evil woman in your life, what you want more than anything is to be understood, heard, and connected with for who you are and who you're not. I just have to maintain that. Am I right or wrong? There are plenty of people. I've worked in the prisons before, right? I worked at Folsom State and I worked at Pelican Bay, two pretty high profile places here in California. And what those prisoners want more than anything is to be heard. And they can be heard. That is the most non-pretentious group of people you will ever meet. People who are in prison for life no longer have to pretend to be anybody else. So you get true humanity out of those guys. And when I resonate with them, it's explosive healing that takes place at that moment. And sometimes can be so explosive that it's traumatizing. So I've had it traumatizing to they're like feeding a steak to somebody who's interested in tacos, and that's not a political statement about steak or tacos, please. The idea is that, what we have here is an opportunity to really get that there's a beauty inside of resonating with somebody at their human core. And, it turns out that all 7.8 billion of us are human. That's what it turns out. We really are. There is something human about us. Again, whether we're men or women, I agree. That's a nice little cutting point which separates it into two groups. The idea is that there's a human core that all of us are, and it can be resonated with. But in order to get there, my conjecture, the whole point here, the whole question that you asked is one has to be in touch with their true voice. You have to get close to that. When you get close to that, then you have access to the wide range of people, whether it's 30 or 40,000 like me, or whether it's, which isn't even 1% of the population of the world, not even close. That once I know that I'm there, I know that I can communicate with a Tibetan monk or a meth addict in LA. And I can get right there with them because what I'm really connecting to is a human vibration.
I very much appreciate how inherently ingrained your profession as a mental health professional is to your immediate response and the way that you view any of these questions, because it really shows me that you care about your role as a healer. Because I think the answer, or perhaps, what you said there from a healer's perspective, absolutely, I inherently, wholeheartedly agree with. And then perhaps for a general society person just going about their day-to-day life, I wouldn't necessarily advocate for you have to kind of meet people where they are and entertain certain things. But obviously, if your goal is to help people, then yes, that and help the people that are in front of you, then yeah, absolutely. Everything you said, I absolutely agree with. And it's a great point.
Yeah, that's why I like being a guest. It's fun. And, really what's here is another piece of this, another corollary to this is you do not need to have a degree to be a healer. All you have to do is be someone who's willing to resonate. That's all you really have to do. I don't have a more profound tool of curing and healing somebody than resonating harmonically with what it is that they're putting forth in their communication, whatever that is. That when you resonate in a human connection, a bi-directional human connection, that is the most powerful healing source of any condition of all types anywhere in the world.
Yeah, I know we're running short on time, so you can keep that answer quick, but I would love to know, what is it that got you interested in the profession that you're doing right now in the first place? I know that could be itself.
No, it's a good question. I can get here. There's no problem. I have this one. So, I was born to heal, and I really mean that. I was born to a family in chaos and disarray. I had two older brothers. They were 10 and 14 years old when I was born. And actually, my one brother, I always say 10 and 14, but I just realized that they weren't 10 and 14. They were 9 and 13. And because they turned 10 and 14 that year. So it's interesting. anyways, they were having whatever adolescent boys were having with their parents, and the four of them were all that was there. And I was called on to be a bundle of joy, to bring peace and comfort to a family in disarray. That's what I did. As soon as I arrived, I was that bundle of joy, and I've been given, as after the fact, both of my brothers and my parents had told me that that's who I was. Now, I haven't been that continuously. Please don't ask my brothers about that. But the idea was that I have been a healer. I've been someone who has been so enchanted with the whole idea of communication ever since I was ever since I was 2 or 3 years old. I remember in my playpen watching my brother speak to my parents and just I want to learn how to do that. I see that there's some deep value there. All the way through school, I wanted to learn how to communicate. And, it just didn't happen in the conventional educational system at all. This is where I learned how to be somebody different than I was in order to protect the person I really was. And that's where we learn it, is in the conventional system. You're not really taught how to have open discourse in the conventional educational system. You're taught how to regurgitate what a teacher says in order to pass. It's not open discourse at all. And, as I kept on going through school, looking for where can I learn how to communicate effectively, I eventually saw that each and every upgrade from junior high to high school made it even worse. So I gave a shot at college, just really hoping that would actually work. And because I loved their helmets and they were only 40 miles away, I went to the University of Michigan. And I went there one time and I dropped out after a year and a half. And then I went back, came out here to California and found myself. But that was unsustainable. So I was encouraged to go back, went back a second time, dropped out one more time, a second time, promising never, ever, ever to go back into mental health again. I'm sorry, to go back into college again. And my mom, because she's a mom, said, well, you're going to have to get a job. It's like, Mom, that's the way moms are, right? And it's like, yeah, okay, I'll get a job. And so she got me an application at a state mental health facility for adolescent boys. And I became a child care worker in January of 1980, which was 44 years ago. And, and one could say that I'm just simply been a glorified child care worker the whole time since that moment, because that's where I really learned that in me communicating with a child only 6 or 7 years younger than me, we were able to create this human connection. And I saw really profoundly, really saw right in front of me and felt and experienced what healing was all about in the communication. Now, I also saw the direction that psychiatry was taking. We had psychiatrists on call at that facility, and we would call them when Jimmy and Johnny got in a fight or Timmy was up too late or something. And he'd come down and he'd interview the child for 3 or 5 seconds and then interview us for 7 or 10 seconds. And then he'd go into the nursing station, take one of these weapons and actually write something in a chart. And then we'd have to go get Jimmy or Johnny or Timmy and hold them down and give them an injection of some, anti-psychotic cocktail or something. And if he stayed in a stupor for 12 or 24 hours, we called that a success story and then actually charted it. And if that's disgusting to you, you should know that that's still going on in all the hospitals all over this country every single day. I mean, maybe all is a little bit too big of a word, but you get my point. It's happening pervasively every single day all over this country. And I was disgusted. It was just not acceptable for me. And I decided that communication is really how psychiatry needs to go. My brother, 13 years older than me, he was already a psychiatrist. So I kind of knew that psychiatry was a possibility and went back to school in order to be a communicating psychiatrist. That's how I went. I went back to sort of see how it was and to, maybe contribute as a communicator. While I was in school is when Prozac got developed and delivered, and Prozac changed the whole world. Most of the people your age or younger don't realize the impact of that particular drug. That drug was on the cover of Newsweek all by itself. It was on the cover of Time all by itself, a green and white capsule. There was talk about putting that drug into the water supply in LA and New York, and it was very, very real. The idea was that it could, it's where the whole notion of chemical imbalance got its insurgence. And I was not into it. I certainly prescribed it. And initially it was there I was being typecast out of medical school and then out of residency as a psychiatrist, the kind of doctor that medicates. And I became really good at medicating and really good at diagnosing over time. But that's how I went into the field, with the idea that I could bring communication here. And then naturally was typecast into a diagnosing, medicating psychiatrist, because that's what the profession asked for. And that's essentially what I did until, for about 14 years, maybe a little longer than that, until like 2006, when I started taking people off of medicine and off their diagnosis and watched them get way better reliably as a function of that. And I think we've talked enough today to learn what's happened since then. That's where soon after that, I began to be a traveling doctor all over the US. I took most of my practice off of medicine and they all got better reliably. And then I started traveling all over the US, being a doctor as a locum tenens, and then traveling around the world in Bhutan and Nepal and Thailand and Israel and France, England, Italy, doing psychiatric work from there and really evaluating the human nature of what it means to be human. Like, what is it that's similar about Italians, French, and Bhutanians? Like, what is that? Bhutanese, I think they're called. The idea is that we all want to be heard. That's what's here. And that's how it's developed. And that's how Welcome to Humanity got developed. That's how Global Madness got developed. That's how True Voice got developed. That's how the Moss method got developed. That's how, everything, the Healthy Healer got developed. It's all just a function of being a glorified childcare worker who is set free into the world.
It's a beautiful story, and thank you very much for sharing it. There's certainly no shortage of disgusting things going on within, whether it is the mental health institutions, the hospitals themselves, whether or not there's Prozac itself in the water. There's certainly no shortage of fluoride and other chemicals added to the water for whatever reasons those may be. And having these conversations with people such as yourself and getting these conversations and this information out there to all of the people that are able to listen to it is an essential part of the shift that we see happening today, of people becoming more conscious of what is going on, not only within themselves, but within the world around them. And only through becoming conscious of these things can we work to optimize these things, again, whether that is our own existence on an individual level or society at large. And so for those who would love to hear more about what it is that you have to say and see more of your content, see more of your work, you've mentioned already a couple places that people can contact you, but you want to just kind of list them off, because I know you have even more websites than we've already mentioned. So where can people hear more of Dr. Fred Moss?
Yeah, the best stuff, the overriding one, the one that shows the most of what I'm up to, is called drfred360.com, drfred360.com, where you can see everything about me. Then my main website is welcometohumanity.net. That's been my website for a number of years, and that's going through a facelift this week, so we may see something different around the corner. And then I'm on social media. I like hanging out on Facebook and LinkedIn, but you can also get to that via drfred360.com. And I can be contacted through email, just regular drfred at welcometohumanity.net. And, I've been coached before not to give too many places at this point in a podcast. So if I'm going to do that, I'm just going to tell you, I'll just go to drfred360.com. And from there, you can get everything you need.
Is there a particular message that you would really like for our guests to walk away with? There's already been so many that are wonderful that people can use to improve their lives. But is there any particular one that stands out, or one that you'd like to add in right here at the end?
Well, the one I usually leave when asked this question is that there might be nothing wrong with you. And we've already talked about that for a number of times. Like, there really might be. Like, it's really a welcome to humanity phenomena. The idea that you're uncomfortable, I totally get it. The idea that that person right there is totally uncomfortable, I totally get it. Even that person did and said what they said or did, I totally get it. The idea is that maybe there's nothing wrong with them. Maybe there's someone who's struggling with what it means to be human in this incredibly challenging world. So the opportunity is to consider that when you're dealing with another person as if they are less than you, you are not doing either you or them a favor. If you're dealing with you as if you're less than them, you're not doing yourself a favor either. The opportunity is to get that we are all human. Each and every one of us. And some of us are a little stranger. What does strange mean? Strange means outside of our particular comfort zone. there's not a real, there's no inherent definition of what strange is, even, because it would be based on some audacious idea that we understood what normal was. But we don't understand what normal is. No one has ever, frankly, given a great definition of what it means to be normal. And so we have this incredible, I would say, arrogant hubris that says that we know what abnormal is, even though we don't know what normal is. That's amazing. That's amazing. There's so much ludicrous, preposterous, absurd ways of thinking that we ourselves have incorporated when looking at the human race. I invite you, whoever you are as a listener, to get that there might be nothing wrong with you and there might be nothing wrong with them. And when that's the case, that if you can get that, you will create at least the framework that allows for you to connect with someone that you otherwise felt was not capable of connecting with you. And from there, that's where healing and love actually emanates. That's what I would say at this point.
Beautiful. Dr. Fred Moss, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Pleasure, Zach. Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thank you.
Dr. Fred Moss, everybody. The Un-Doctor. What a guy. Thank you very much to Dr. Fred for coming on the show. A funny story about Dr. Fred, I kind of underestimated him at first because I saw the title of Psychiatrist. My red flags and bullshit flags were kind of raised and my hackles were up. But little did I know he was yet another perfect example of what it means to be a mental health professional. Someone that went into the belly of the beast of these institutions of mental health and got the licensure, got the title, got the fancy letters at the end of his name to be able to do what was right and what he knew in his heart he had to do, and just got the licensing to do it. It's really wonderful. I love connecting with professionals like Dr. Fred and like the very many other professionals I've had on this show that have done the same, got into the belly of the beast of establishments and are doing what's right, regardless of what the institutions might say. And I'm sure there's plenty more out there, so if you happen to be one of those people, or if you know one, please do send them my way. I would love to have them on the show. Do stay tuned, otherwise there are very many episodes coming your way. I'm going to be getting these out as fast as possible. At this time of saying this, I have another 25 whole episodes already recorded, waiting to edit, waiting to publish, waiting to come your way on so many different interesting topics, some of which you may have never even heard of. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel wherever you're listening. This way you get notified when I post a new episode. Please think about showing some love, subscribe to the channel, put on your post notifications. This way you'll be the first to know when I post a new episode. As a reminder, if you're interested in being a guest or you have any other inquiries, email me at zakthehealthking@gmail.com. That's zakthehealthking@gmail.com. My own website is zakthehealthking.com, where you can check out my show on the popular platforms or search for it on your favorite. You're listening to the Health King's Court. Ancient wisdom, modern health.